Lex. This is the Let's Grow podcast, and today we have a special guest, my sister, my best friend. She is going to tell us about her journey. I'm going to let her introduce herself because I'm a little biased, but we will be talking about all things growth as we lead up to the conference this year. I am so excited. She's coming back to be a speaker, and if you already know who she is, then you know you need to be in the room. So, tell us about yourself.
Yes, thank you for that introduction. I am Megan Nelson. I am the founder of the Pivoting Professional, which is a community where we humanize the professional experience and cultivate community through professional experiences. So it's something I have had the pleasure of building this past year, but also cultivating community in. I'm also a healthcare strategist at a top hospital. Both of those jobs, I guess you could say, are something I love to do. They both intersect really well, and they both tested me and stretched me in different ways. And I can't wait to talk about that on the panel, like Lex said, for the third time, which is, I can't believe I'm sitting here again, but I'm super excited to just talk to y'all about that and all that I do.
And so I just want to put it out there that you're coming back because the people requested you. I was gonna let you live. I was gonna let you sit in the audience and enjoy yourself, which you will still get to do, right?
Yes, I will.
Because we have
Two
more
panels.
coming up. We got two
Yeah.
panels this year instead of one. But a lot of people were drawn to what you were saying last year, and I think that sitting here a year later, you've gone through a lot.
Yes.
You've had a lot of transformation. Being that that's the theme of this year, I could not have you not be on the panel because I've watched you walk through these transformations, and it has been a blessing to see and to be a part of, but it hasn't been easy. So
Correct.
I think that, yes, I know you were on the panel the last two times, but I think that this one is better. Not because we have more people, not because it's the third time, not because the conference is bigger than what it used to be, but because the conversations are going to be on another level. You know, like I think last year we talked a lot about like surface level solutions and what do I do when this happens and things like that. But I think this year we're going deeper with this year's theme being embracing transformation and leaning into the change that comes with that and really discussing the uncomfortable things and really focusing in on how do I grow through the transformation and not go through it. So, can you tell us about your greatest transformation? It can be one, it can be multiple, but what do you feel like has been the greatest transformation that you've experienced that has made you the person you are today?
Definitely, there's multiple, which I'm sure we can all relate to. I feel like through life, we transform on a daily basis, but we don't always speak about those transformations. So for me, I would say one of my biggest transformations was me deciding to fall flat on my face on thinking that I was going to follow this one plan of becoming a nurse. When I graduated high school in 2018, I had this huge dream of I was going to become a nurse and I was going to become a nurse practitioner. I was going to be married, have kids, and be working in a clinic 9 to 5, and that was it, right? And then in 2020, when COVID happened, I got accepted into nursing school, a huge accomplishment for me. And then I started nursing school and realized I do not like this. And I realized that just in labs, and I will always be in labs learning, and everybody else would be smiling with excitement, and I would just be like, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. And that was a really hard realization for me because my parents and myself had invested so much time and money into this dream that I had, and I had to kind of go to them and say, hey, I don't want to do this, and I don't know what I want to do next. So my parents gave me the opportunity, which I'm very thankful for, to pivot, to figure out what I wanted to do and what I wanted to do next. I knew I loved healthcare. That didn't change. I just didn't want to be in direct patient care. So I found out about public health. I think I was just Googling one day, if to be completely honest. I was Googling and I found out what public health was. And I was like, okay, I think I could do this. I want to be informed because so many people in my family deal with chronic diseases. So I wanted to be informed about what public health was. So I got my undergraduate in public health. And then I said, okay, how can I apply what I've learned in public health but bring it back into the hospital space? So then I found out about healthcare administration. I said, I can get my master's in healthcare administration and walk my way up the ladder until then. So I started networking with MHA people on LinkedIn. And through that whole process, I was consistently changing and transforming. I was consistently being tested, consistently having doors slammed in my face, consistently like, am I going to fail again? Like, am I going to be in a situation where God is going to say, oh, this is not the plan anymore? And that's scary for me because I'm a person that really loves control and really loves to be on a plan. But that transformation of having to surrender to God and say, oh, I know if I stay here, I'm going to be miserable and you don't live here anymore, so I have to move. That surrendering was probably the biggest transformation I've ever had. And I had to do it swiftly. Because when he speaks on stuff like that, you got to move with him or you going to get left behind. So while I've had others, I definitely think that's my biggest one to date.
And see, I love hearing about that because I had the pleasure of being in the midst of all of that. I feel like we grew our friendship in the midst of your pivot. And I was able to have a front row seat at a lot of that, and the way you speak about it today is not the way you spoke about it years ago. So it's just really encouraging to hear you speak about it and say like, I had to make the move. Like, you are one of those people, like, you really do value stability. And I have seen you like just sit and be like, nope, I'm not moving from here. I'm not moving from here. I'm not moving from here. And then having to actually make the move and to actually do it, I know how hard that was for you. And listening to you talk about it on the other side, I mean, it's encouraging to me because I remember that. Like, I really remember you saying, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I always knew I wanted to do this, but now I don't know. Da 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 da. And then we're here. And it wasn't easy. Like, it was very uncomfortable, but it was necessary. And I love that you talked about saying, this is not the plan anymore, and having those real honest conversations like, all right, I know that God is pushing me. I know that God is taking me in a different direction than what I planned. And I think about the grief attached to that. I think about the way that we have to grieve our expectations when we surrender to God and say like, I'm going to live the life that you have for me and not the life that I have for myself, because they be different sometimes. It's difficult. Like, it's very uncomfortable to say, all right, I'm not going to do what I want to do, but I'm going to do what you want me to do. And that's hard. So I commend you for that. But I also want to kind of dive into that a little bit. When it comes to the grief of grieving those expectations and the plans and the timeline that you had, how did you navigate that? How did you navigate saying goodbye to one thing and saying hello to the unknown?
Honestly, to this day, I still ask myself that question of like, how did I grieve my aspirations and dreams in 2020 and 2021? Because for me, when you, like you said, when you stick to this dream in your head, you can't even think about it not going that way. Like, you so stuck to that. So when it got, literally, I will say, I felt like it got taken away from me. Like, I felt like God took my teddy bear and he wouldn't give it back to me. So it was a lot of anger at first. Like, I was mad that the God I knew would do something like that to me. I was like, this is my plan. Like, we talked about this. I've been praying about this. I done told my grandma because I know my grandma been praying about it too. So when he took it from me, I was mad. Like, I was mad at him. But in 2020, I had this thought that I couldn't be mad at God. Like, you can't be mad at God. His plan is always correct. So I wasn't sharing that anger with him. I was more so internalizing that anger and being mad at myself for not just sticking it out. Like, why can't you just stick it out? You have good grades. You can do it. Like, you can do the next 4 years in nursing school. So instead of saying, God, I'm really mad and I'm frustrated because I don't know what I'm going to do next and I can't fail. Failure is not in my language. I was just taking that anger and internalizing it and crying and just being like, Megan, you can't do this. Like, you have to stick to this plan. So I would say my grieving of that dream did not start until I was able to sit with God in my quiet time and be like, I'm so mad at you. Like, I'm so frustrated at you because why would you take me through this dark season when I just got out of high school? I don't know what I want to do in my life. I thought it was going to go this way. I also was living back home where for the prior 3 to 4 years, I was staying in Baton Rouge. So I was in a whole new environment. And I was like, God, how could you do this? Like, I'm not prepared for this. I didn't feel prepared. Yeah. So that wasn't the first time I had to walk through grief, but it was the first time I had to grieve something that was not a person. So it was very different for me. And the language I had to find for it over time was to forgive myself for not going after something that God said wasn't for me, because God forgave me before I even was saying I wasn't going to do it. It was more so I had to sit back and say, it's okay for you not to go after that thing that everybody thought you were going to do. Because a lot of the times I was sitting back like, what is everybody going to think of me? Like, I've gone through life. When I said I was going to do something, I was going to do it. And if I said I was going to get a 4.0, I was going to get a 4.0. This was the first time in my life where I said I was going to do something and then I backed off of it and said, I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. So I was dealing with that, but I really had to forgive myself. That was the biggest piece as far as me grieving that process.
That's so good. And you just did a whole lot. I'm such a proud best friend and sister because you didn't always have the language for that. And I'm listening to you and I'm like, yes, like you get it. Like, you get what we be trying to tell you. Like, we be trying to tell you, like, girl, it's okay. Like, you said yes to God. That's what matters. When you say yes to God, you walk into his grace and not your ability to do anything, because your works will hustle you into and out of anything.
Yes.
But when it comes to being in his will and being in his plan for your life, you operate in grace. You're not doing the hustle and bustling and out of your own flesh work. You're actually saying, no, I have to depend on God to get this done. And I think that is such a great mindset to be in, because when it comes to change, when it comes to transformation, it's very unfamiliar, right? Like, you are consciously making a change to not do what you've always done. When you are saying, I'm not going to do what I've always done, this is going to be different and it is going to be unfamiliar, it's incredibly important that you lean into that grace and you say, all right, God, you said we were going to do this. Exactly. So now you got to show me how we're going to do that. Because I clearly can't do it by myself. And that's when you really kind of walk out a different journey of, like, yes, discovering what you're going to do, what the assignment is, what the calling is. But I think what's even more important is that in that process, you are discovering your original design and you are discovering who he really did create you to be, because you say, wait a second, this was in me the whole time. Yep. I've always had that love for healthcare, right? In your circumstance, like, I've always had this love of healthcare, but I didn't know that it would be fleshed out in this way. So I think leaning into his grace is, like, really key in the underlying theme of your surrender and you saying, I'm gonna go through this transformation and I'm gonna go through this change and I'm gonna walk it out. So that was really good.
Yeah, you have to walk it out. I mean, there is no way around it. Like, I tell people all the time, we want this thing in our head, but we don't ever want to walk out the process of it. Like, I always said, I knew I was going to be in some type of executive position. I just thought it was going to be through nursing. Like, I thought I was going to be a nursing director. But now on the path I'm on, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'm supposed to run a hospital. You know? So I knew the positioning that I aspired to be in, but I felt like it had to be through this one path. But I didn't want to walk out the process of figuring it out because it was hard. And I was like, I don't do hard. You know, I do stability. Like Lexi said, I love stability. So when I felt like I wasn't stable and figuring out my next steps, I was ready to run. And God knew that. Like, he was like, you run from hard. You don't do hard. You like to always feel like you have a plan. And as soon as I was ready to live in the uncomfortable, he really showed me that that is my positioning. I do well in uncomfortable situations. I am able to pivot well, but you won't ever know that unless you're in a position to see yourself do that.
Yeah, that is so good. And I think that it really speaks to the power of being in God's will, because if you're not in his will, you could pivot all the time, 50 million times, and it won't work, because at the end of the day, you would have not known that you were good at pivoting if you didn't surrender to that first pivot. And like, I'm always telling people that the promise is in the process. We think about destinations. We think about like the goal is this and that is it. Nothing else. This is the goal. This is what I want. This is what I'm going after. When in reality, God wants us. He doesn't want the destination. He doesn't want whatever you consider your promise or your purpose or whatever. He wants you. He wants your heart. He wants your character. He wants the person of you. But you don't discover that until you're in the midst of a process, because then you start to experience things that say, I didn't know that I can be a little controlling. I didn't know that I could be a little selfish. I didn't know that I could be someone that, I don't know, you know what I'm saying, like character wise. You don't know these things until you're walking out a certain process. So I think that's incredibly important to note, that you need to embrace that process. You need to embrace the idea of going through something and not just being in the midst of it. You know, like, I think it's important that you think about it in a growth mindset of like, I am growing through this and I'm going to come out stronger. I'm going to come out more resilient, more flexible, more adaptable. I'll be able to do more and really just be more, honestly, like even within your being, when I go through this process and not just say, I'm trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B in the fastest route possible. Whereas we just enjoy it, and you just enjoy the journey. So that's really good. And I'm, again, glad to see on the other side of this that we can kind of make sense of it, because it did not make sense in the beginning, right? Yeah. So, what would you say gratitude, like what, I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to word this. What role did gratitude play in your journey?
I would definitely say I was not always grateful or thankful for the process it took for me to get here. Because as you mentioned, it was hard. Like, there was a lot of days where I just did not understand why I had to wait on certain stuff. Like, even before I got the job I'm in now, I waited maybe 5 to 6 months before I got a job. And for me, I was like, well, God, why do I have to wait? You know, I just finished this internship and I'm ready for a full-time position. I don't want to be out of work. And I kept applying to all of these different jobs, like jobs that I was probably overqualified for, but I just wanted something. And through that process, he really taught me that sometimes I'm rushing to get something that isn't mine. And before realizing that, I was not appreciative of that process. Like, I felt like I'm prepared. You know, I went through everything you've asked me to do, I've done. So why can't I have this one thing? So the gratitude piece did not always come easy to me. I feel like it only came easier to me when I was able to sit back in my process and through my journey and say, growing does not always have to be hard. And once I started to say that, it's a mindset shift though. It's not something that I would say is easy at all. It's not something that I would try to push on other people. And I believe someone in our Let's Talk About It program said that, of like, growing does not always have to be hard. We have internalized that because everybody says it, of like, girl, you know that process was gonna be hard. You know, God gotta take you through the fire before you can get to this destination, like you said, the peace that you want. But it's a mindset thing. If you're constantly absorbing that from people and not looking at it from the perspective of maybe he's really trying to teach me something, the adaptability piece, or he really wants me to release control. There's something he needs me to gain through this process of growth that I'm not able to gain if he just gave me that job or he just gave me that destination. So whenever I'm going through, I feel like a hard season or a season where I can't really understand what God is trying to bring me through or trying to make me learn, I always say to myself, Megan, growing doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't always have to be painful, and it doesn't always have to be tied to some destination. Sometimes I have to just sit in that process and say, okay, God, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm excited for it. Like, I can't wait to see why you have been bringing me through this process. I can't wait for you to reveal it to me. Because when you start speaking like that, the people around you, if you talk to your friends, which I'm hope, y'all speak to y'all community, they'll start speaking like that. And then it's no longer, when we going through these seasons of growth, it's no longer like, girl, this been like the worst season of my life. I don't know what God doing. I don't have this. I don't have that. It started being like, y'all, this season wasn't what I expected, but man, am I excited for it, because I don't know what he doing. And that's the exciting part of it. Like, I don't know what's under the Christmas tree, but I'm excited for it. And you have to start switching your mindset and your language to things like that, because that's when you start to get in that gratitude of like, God didn't have to put you in that season. He could have put you in a season that you wanted, full of blessings, but guess what? You wasn't prepared for it. You would have lost it anyway. Right. So rather
and
go.
Was it a blessing?
Was it a blessing if you were not prepared for it and you couldn't sustain it? And that's the amazing thing about God, is he knows us so well that he wouldn't put us in that predicament. He has to put us through the process first. And again, that's the language piece for me, of finding the language to say, God, I'm thankful. Even when my life doesn't look like how I want it to look, even when I don't understand why you are putting me in certain predicaments, like this podcast, or me speaking to different individuals, or running the pivoting professional, I'm like, God, why you want me? Like, you could find somebody else that's more qualified, they like to engage and all of this great stuff. And he like, I didn't choose them. I chose you. And you have to walk this process out, no matter how comfortable it is, because I need you to gain something from it, and you are. But if you're so worried about the destination and how some days are hard and you in multiple meetings, you missing all the good stuff I'm giving to you as well. I think the gratitude just comes with your mindset, and also your community, but also your language to your growth season.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned the influence of your community, because I think it's important to note, okay, what language am I consuming in the process of like hearing other people speak to me, but also what language am I speaking in my difficult seasons? And I think that's the difference between enduring something and embracing it, because when you endure it, like, I gotta go through this. This has to, and it's probably not gonna go my way. Da 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 da. But when you're embracing it, you say, you know what? This is real uncomfortable. But if I remember correctly, every time I've ever been uncomfortable, God has done something. Yeah. And if he's doing something, then I need to start embracing that, and I need to get comfortable saying, right, I've seen this before. We've been here before. Every time that I've been uncomfortable, there's been growth on the other side of it. Mm-hmm. So let me embrace it instead of combating it. Exactly. And looking at it as something that's more of like, ugh, I gotta go through this, man. Here we go again. Yep. Da 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 da. Like, no, you really have to change your language. But again, let's go back to that community piece, because I love that you mentioned the influence of your community. Mm-hmm. What role in any of your transformations did your community play, and how did that affect the journey?
My community is a huge part of my life. Like, I honestly believe that God gave me my community as a safety blanket sometimes. Like, they feel like a weighted blanket. They provide that comfort and that peace on days where I'm really just mad, angry, crashing out about something, whether it's business, personal, professional, everything in between. But I will say that I didn't always have the community I have now. So before I cultivated the community I have now with God, I had people that I would say we were all in the same space, but sometimes that is not good. We're all in the same space. So if I'm in a negative space, they're in a negative space, we only speak in negative.
Yeah.
If I'm fearful and everybody around me fearful, I live in fear all the time, and I think I'm supposed to live that way. And I believe that as I grew my relationship with God and I just started talking to him more frequently, there was a lot of things that I said and he was like, we're going to change your community a little bit. We're going to start connecting you with people that aren't exactly like you. Like, they are not as fearful as you. They are more business savvy than you. They have a better relationship with me than you. And there was a lot of stuff, especially I would say through the last 2 years, through my relationships with you and other friends I have. Y'all have held me accountable on stuff and spoken stuff over my life that have become fruitful. And that's how I'm able to see that my community can withstand. Because there's some stuff that I have never told y'all. And then you'll be like, oh yeah, how's this going? Or like, how you doing today? And I'm like, how did she even know that? Because you speak to God.
Yeah.
I was in a place in my life where I knew who God was. I was aware of him, but I didn't really have anybody in my community that knew him better than I knew him. So I was not learning certain things. There was certain things that I would talk to God about, and I'm like, okay, God, well, why is this way? Or like, why can't I get over this? And I would literally have a friend come to me and say, girl, I've been praying on this, and God had you on my heart, and I just want to tell you, like, you're doing a good job. Because I really struggle with that sometimes. Like, I struggle with me telling myself, like, you doing good. I mean, everything isn't going your way, but you're doing good. So my community, especially through the times where I am navigating a new business and I'm navigating a new career, they encourage me, they pour into me, but they also hold me accountable on stuff. They're not yes men. And I'm thankful for that. There's a lot of times where I'm unsure about something and I'll ask them about it. And you, for example, you say, well, I think you should go pray about that. Like, I know you came to me for advice and you want my opinion, but go pray about it. And then we can talk about it, but go talk to God first. I didn't always have people like that. Sometimes I had friends that, I held their opinion to a higher standard than before talking to God. And that's something I had to learn from you, of like you holding me accountable, of saying, did you pray about that? Like, go talk to God about that. But having people around you that, number one, aren't exactly like you. Number two, they are willing to grow. They're not willing to stay the same. They hold you accountable on your growth and what you are saying you're going to do. But number three, a community that can withstand different seasons. We're not going to look the same as we did 5 years ago, 5 years in the future. A community that's saying, hey, I know we're going to change. I know we're going to grow. I know there's going to be grief. I know there's going to be pain. But we're built to withstand this because God cultivated it. And he's in the room and he's in every conversation. And that's another thing I always tell people. When you go and have lunch or whatever with your friends, are you comfortable to speak about your relationship with God at the table? Is he a part of everybody's life? Like, don't ever hide pieces of yourself to sit at any table. And that's just a big piece for me when it comes to my community. So they definitely provide the safety blanket, but they also provide a lot of accountability, a lot of like, hello Megan, what you doing today, girl?
That's very true. We don't play. We are very honest with each other, but I think that it's so necessary and it's so needed. I know y'all be saying I be going a little too hard and I be a little too intense, but it's like, it's not me, it's God. I'll have conversations with y'all and I'll be like, yeah, because I don't know. What about this? What do you think about that? I feel like maybe you would do really well doing XYZ. And you'll be like, girl, I'm not doing it. I don't want to do that.
100%, yep.
What that is? Why? I don't think that's me. And then I would go home and a couple days pass by and God would be like, pray about it again. And I'm like, but she said she wasn't going to do it, so why I got to pray about it? And just really being consistent, not giving up on your community as well, because with that accountability, sometimes will come frustration, right? Like we will get frustrated and be like, girl, I want to shake you. Like,
yeah, literally.
We a lot of times will say like, watch him out, fix that. How about we change the language on that a little bit? How about we say that differently? But it's out of love. It's out of that support.
Exactly.
It's like, I know that you feel uncomfortable doing something, but at the end of the day, I'm with you.
Yeah.
You know, we doing this together. We do life together. And I just want to highlight that when you think about your community and you are cultivating your village and you look around and you say, okay, who is helping and who is hindering? You really want to take inventory of that and say, like, this person really does push me. And there was something else that you said. You said you're now starting to see the fruit of the conversations you've had with people in your community. And I think that is extremely important, because if you know and you can see good fruit, then you can also spot bad fruit. Yeah. And that's not to say, like, go do an audit on your friendships. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is just be mindful of what are you consuming in your community. Be mindful of what that looks like when it comes to your mindset, your heart posture, the way that you go about doing things. We've talked a lot about heart posture lately and character building and really cultivating a life within us and around us that is pleasing to what God is telling us to do. And I just think that that's like really important when you think about the people in your community, because if you are trying to create an environment that will produce that good fruit, you got to be able to spot the bad fruit too. So I know that's not fun, but it is something that's necessary. And if you take anything from what she said today, I hope that you can take that. I hope that you hear her heart when she speaks about her community. I hope that you hear her heart when she speaks about her relationship with God, because it has been a journey. And just listening to you talk about where you are now versus how you were when we met in college. So we met in 2018, but we didn't grow close until about 2020.
Right.
Like, there were 2 years of just like, hey, happy birthday, that's it. But then in 2020, it was like in the midst of your surrender, I guess we can say. It was in the midst of your surrender where you were walking out a transformation that I was able to kind of get a peek into that and say, hold on, let's talk about that real quick. And I honestly, I don't think that was anything but God, because I was in a season of praying for friendships that would be fruitful. I was in a season of praying for friendships that would be genuine and that would grow with me and not against me, and like really like we grow together. It's not just me or just you, but we're actually growing together and holding each other accountable. So it was honestly an answered prayer for me, but it was also like, wait a second, like she's going through a lot. Kind of felt like called or pushed to walk that out with you. So it's just nice to see you on the other side of it and say like, wow, this transformation has been different. And then when I think about the timeline, okay, that was 2020 until about 2023. 2024 was a whole nother year in itself. And that was like its own transformation for the both of us, because I think we both were in a season where we were changing rapidly, exponentially, like very quickly, of like, oh my goodness, like God revealed this to me, God is showing me this, God is pushing me to do this, da 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 da. But it was like the first time we both had to grow us like alongside each other, and not just like you growing or me growing, but it was like we both were navigating different changes. What can you say about that season for your community, for our friendship, for your growth as a person, as a woman, as a believer? What can you speak about that transformation?
Yes. 2024, as she said, was a beast. I feel like everybody felt that way. Like every time I talk to somebody about 2024, they're always like, girl, I'm like, right? But honestly, 2024 really was the year I felt like, okay, I'm a grown woman now. This is real. Like, I'm not no child no more. I'm not a teenager. I'm a grown woman. And I have to figure this out. Like, I need to figure out what I'm going to do I also felt like 2024 was a huge piece of me falling back in love with myself. It was a huge piece of like, okay, like I have a great community, but I need to find myself. Like, they can't always bring me joy if I can't bring myself joy, right? A huge part of 2024 for me was finding joy again. Like, my screensaver for the past, 8 to 9 months have been the joy character in Inside Out 2. And it's like, today we are going to have joy. Because I have to constantly remind myself of that, even in the hard seasons, like, find joy. And that was a big piece of 2024 for me because I was going through a huge transformation. I was graduating with my graduate degree, with my master's of healthcare administration. I was also trying to figure out, okay, am I moving from Baton Rouge? Am I moving back to New Orleans? What is my plan? And like I said earlier, y'all, I don't do well without a plan. So all these conversations with God, and I'm like, but you're not giving me nothing. Like, what are you doing? I need you to answer right now. My lease is up in 2 months. I don't have no plan. So he essentially told me was, I've been told you what we was gonna do, you just didn't accept it, right? Like, you keep saying, God, what's the plan? What's the plan? Like, I've been told you, I'm not changing my mind. You need to accept this. So I had to accept it. There was no getting around it. He didn't give me any other alternatives. So I moved back to New Orleans, and I'm from New Orleans. So when I moved back to New Orleans, I was in this place of like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to live here. New Orleans doesn't fit who I am anymore. And then I moved back. I started my new job. I graduated in September and started my new job in the same month. I literally did it within a week of each other. And I was still living in New Orleans. Like, I'm like, do I want to live in New Orleans? Where do I want to stay? Through the past few months of living in New Orleans, God has been dropping so many gems, like little nuggets of like, this is why I need you here. This is why I moved you back here. This is why. You kept asking me why a year ago. If I would have let you continue to live in Baton Rouge in your comfortable little bubble that you had created and exit me out of, because I didn't live in that bubble with you, you would have never moved to New Orleans. I had to get you to live here to drop the gems. And for me, that was hard because, again, I felt like God was telling me no, and he was taking my teddy bear away from me, which was the life I had created in Baton Rouge, away from my hometown. So again, it was the first year where I was like, I'm a grown woman. I have to make these decisions. My community is there to support me, but they can't make these decisions for me. They also can be there for me, support me, show up for me, but I'm still not happy. So I had to do a lot of inner work of like, girl, why are you not happy? Like, look around you. Is it something internally? Are you not happy with how you look? Like, what's going on? And for me, again, it had a lot to do with I had lost finding joy in the small things, like showing up for myself. I don't know, as a black woman, sometimes I forget how to show up for myself. I forget that you don't have to wait on other people to celebrate you. For my birthday this year, I took it upon myself to be like, this is what we doing this year. I want to go work out because working out is a big piece of who I am. I want to go do these things. And yes, my community would have done it for me with joy, but it was important for me to do it for myself, to remind myself of like, Megan, it's important for you to be able to sustain your own joy. That was my prayer for the last 5 to 6 months of 2024 is, God, please help me sustain my joy. On my birthday, the morning of my birthday, I was like, God, I just want to sustain joy today. That's it. Everything else is a plus. Everybody supporting me and telling me happy birthday, that's great. But I just want to sustain joy today. I want to feel it in its fullness. So every time something didn't go my way, every time, somebody may have not shown up, he still answered that prayer for me. So in 2024, when I was figuring it all out and I felt like I was crashing every day, my community was still a huge piece. There were a lot of things that I know I would have never got through without them. I know that I would have never shown up for myself if it wasn't for them pushing me and showing up even when I didn't ask them to, or checking on me even when I said I was okay. But it was a lot of looking back at the woman I am and saying, all of that's cool, but God needs you to do some inner work. He's The community is good. But now let's bring a mirror up. And like I say all the time, your best mirror is the people around you and your environment around you. So scan it. But the best mirror for me last year was looking back at myself and saying, oh, you've been in La La Land. Because listen, when we come out of La La Land and you come out and you like, I don't like it here. I don't like it here. That's how I felt. I don't like it here. And he was like, oh, you don't? You should have never liked it here. So it was a lot of reworking. That's the best way to put it. 2024 was a reworking of Megan Nelson, the brand, the personal brand, the professional brand, but the woman I am, the woman of God I am, the woman I represent to my community, to my family, who I want to be. Not who people perceive me as, but who I want to be.
And if you haven't caught on by now, this is why she's back for the third time. She don't understand. People like, why they asking for me? Because like I would post things on Instagram and say like, who do y'all want to see on the panel next year? And they'd be like, my girl Megan. And when you talk to her, she's like, well, I didn't really have that much to say last year. And I'm like, good. That means that you get another chance to do it. But when you hear the transformations that she spoke about and the self-awareness that she has about herself during those transformations in those seasons and the different changes that she's had to go through, you understand why she's on this panel, right? So, in closing, I want us to talk about the Cultivate Conference. So, you've been to every Cultivate Conference. Yes. You have been in the chaos of the first one. You have been in the, I guess, cohesion of the second one because it went almost perfectly. And now we're planning for the third. Mm-hmm. What can you tell me about your experience at the conference? I want you to talk about what you enjoyed thus far, and then also what are you looking forward to this year as we close out today's episode.
Honestly, and I'm saying this from a perspective of a woman that has been in a lot of spaces with other women, the Cultivate Conference is something really special. And I'm not saying this from a perspective of Lacey is my best friend. I'm saying this from a perspective of a woman who is constantly trying to grow herself, but it's also really hard on herself. So every Cultivate Conference I've been to, I have been able to meet another woman and she does not know what I'm going through. We're mostly strangers in that room unless you know somebody from social media or somewhere else. Like I've met a woman and she just come up to me and poured into me. And I'm like, girl, you don't even know me. Like I'm random. And she would just pour into me. And I'm like, you don't know what you just did for me. Because I walked in this room scared. I walked in this room nervous. I don't know what is going on in this room. And I would meet a woman and she'll just be like, you look good, girl. Or like, you just did that on a panel. And I'm like, really? Y'all thought so? And I think that's what I've gotten from everyone so far. And it's crazy because every time I walk into next year's conference or this year's conference, I never know what to expect. I'm coming in with brand new eyes every year. But every year I meet a woman and she comes up to me and pours. And I pour right back. But then afterwards we have a conversation and the next day we talking on Instagram. I mean, it's crazy. It's like we done known each other for years. And I'm like, girl. And now we follow each other all year. Then the next year, I'm like, girl, you coming to the conference? And she like, girl, you know I'm going to be there. It happens again. You meet someone random and you have that same interaction of just feeling full. Like feeling full in your spirit of, I'm in the right room. I don't feel like I have to pretend to be anybody else. But I'm also in a room where if somebody on that panel call you out in your spirit, you like, God, she don't even know. She just did that to me. Because that'll happen to me before. Yes, I've been sitting on the panel, but somebody next to me, another panelist, will literally say something. I'm like, girl, you trying to call me? You trying? And it's like, she don't know I'm going through that situation, but God will literally make sure the right people are in the room that need to hear what needs to be said. So one of the things that I'm looking forward to at this year's conference is, number one, the panelists. She hasn't said who the panelists are, but y'all, these panelists, I'm so excited about them because these are women that I know, but they are also women that do not play. And if y'all have seen me on the previous conferences, I'm usually the one that I always feel like I'm talking too stern. But I'm talking in a tone that is like, I don't play about y'all. So I need y'all to not play about yourselves. And I feel like the rest of the ladies that are going to be on the panel this year, they don't play about y'all, but they don't play about themselves. So I feel like we come in this year with a different tone. We come in this year with guys sitting right here and he like, let's go. Like, it feels like a brand new start. It feels like God has renewed so many of us that are going to sit on a panel and we can speak from a different perspective. But I also am really excited for the women that are going to be in the room, because again, it just feels new every time. And for me, when I'm trying to cultivate community or just meet new women, I'm always excited with who God is going to put in a room, because I never know. She never knows either. We don't know who is going to show up. So that's the two things I'm really excited about this year. And I know it's going to be amazing. So I'm kind of anticipating. I'm a little nervous, y'all. I'm not going to lie. So y'all stick with me, but I'm excited.
Me too. I'm excited. I'm always kind of nervous because like it's a lot of weight to carry. But at the end of the day, I'm also excited because again, I know that this is God and this is not me. So I'm excited to see what he does. I'm excited to see how it goes. We're going to see. Thank you so much for spending today with us and giving us a little tea about your transformation, but also hyping us up, getting us ready for conference. If you are interested in joining us this year, it will be April 5th at 2 p.m. in Prairieville, Louisiana. You can get your tickets because you need a ticket. You can get your ticket at bossesblog.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Let's Grow podcast, and I can't wait to see you there. Bye.
Bye, y'all.